refused to betray friends, refused to identify their orders. They stood firm, and they both paid the price. At that point, we see vast difference. We know that Sam Davis had in his saddlebag documentation which was used to convict him as a spy. In the case of Jobe, he attempted to eat and shoot up and destroy the documents he had and kept that information from being known. Sam Davis died not an easy death, hanging for 3.5 minutes before he was dead. But he did die with dignity, and his body was treated with dignity. In the case of Jobe, as we know, he was tortured. He was mutilated, eyes put out, tongue cut out. He eventually was either hung or drugged. And if you read the different accounts, and our best accounts are letters, correspondence written by the family, it's not even clear exactly how they found him. I've read one that said he was found hanging, others that he was just dumped in a field. He was victimized by a platoon of lower-ranking soldiers under a sergeant. Obviously, Sam Davis was in front of an officer tribunal and such. But what they did for us, I think, is the same. They reflected a commitment to a cause and a loyalty to not only the cause but friends that we can be proud of. So, what accounts for the difference? Well, in the case of Sam Davis, there was a friend of the family who actually was the Yankee collaborator, who had business with the Yankees, had contact with the leadership in Nashville, who volunteered and was able to go and retrieve the body. But what he also brought back was the story. And a story coming from the enemy, transmitted by one who is a part of that Yankee establishment. A lot of credibility. Even though it took 30 years before the story was recorded and began to be circulated. John C. Kennedy is the individual that helped the family. I heard someone just last week do a history of Sam Davis. They never mentioned Kennedy, and I think Kennedy's a key figure because he's one that originally brought the story back. About 30 years later, he wrote the story and presented it to one of the Confederate veterans groups that appeared in the Confederate magazine of that time. And he helped organize the foundation that raised the money to build the statues that are in Pulaski and on the Capitol Hill, right outside your window, if I remember right. He also worked with the artist. He's the one that told the artist, that's the likeness. You got it right. And the lesson there perhaps is history requires someone to tell the story. So we're just beginning to really catch up with the story of Jobe and having to go to other special sources. But I hope that we can, in fact, I'd even like to see the Sam Davis home and have a special section for the memory of Jobe and explain, what the relationship was. And I don't know, it's hard to be tempted by your freedom to tell the secrets. In Jobe's case, he was not being tempted by a promise of freedom. He was being tortured. And he held up. He sure did. All right, there are people here who can claim relationships. I'm going to defer to John Moore and let him talk a little bit more about the family, perhaps.
Thanks, John.
I'll tell you a little bit about the Jobe family. First of all, this is Elihu Jobe. I'll leave all these out so y'all can look at them. Elihu's parents were James and Catherine Pitt Jobe, Murray County. Elihu was born in 1809 in Murray County, and as a young man was an apprentice furniture builder. 1833, that was a busy year for him. He left Murray County, moved to Mechanicsville, Tennessee. Y'all know where Mechanicsville is? It's right in the middle of it. Okay, he bought a farm about a couple of miles from here, built a cabin. Looked about like this. This is a sketch I did of it, as near as I could go through several different photographs. He married Mary Smith and went into the furniture business. Now, I've seen a chest of drawers, a couple of china cabinets, and a sugar chest that he made. He also made coffins and cotton gins. Later on in life, he had the title of squire. Now, would that be like the county court?
The justice of the peace.
Good, okay. He was a squire, and at one time was a postmaster here. Had 7 children. He and Mary had 7 children. Oldest was Luke, Catherine, Benjamin. Benjamin was great-grandfather of Ben, sitting right over there. Hold up your hand, Ben. Okay. The next was DeWitt. This is DeWitt's picture.
Same picture.
Next was Martha Ann. That was my great-grandmother. Nancy Price and Lavinia. A little bit about Mary Smith Jobe family. She had 2 brothers, and maybe another, but this is all I could find on James Beecham Smith and Alexander Smith. James Beecham Smith had 2 sons, Thomas Benton Smith and John Smith. But Thomas Benton Smith was the youngest general in the Confederate Army. Alexander Smith had a son named DeWitt. This is the one that was the Avenger. When DeWitt Jobe was tortured, this is the man that went after all of the Yankees.
Well, you want to explain that a little bit? People may not know about what you're speaking about, Avenger.
When DeWitt was killed, this man, there's been some things. Some said he deserted. Some said he was scouting for the Coleman Scouts. He never did appear on any list for the Coleman Scouts, but he kind of got upset about this. So he decided he'd kill as many Northern soldiers and friends of the Northern soldiers as he could. Somewhere between 15 and 50 people he killed. I've talked to some of the family members about it. They've confirmed some of these things. As far as James Beecham Smith's son, John Smith was in the Battle of Murfreesboro. He was killed and his body never found, probably buried in a mass grave. Thomas Benton Smith, the youngest brigadier in the Confederate Army, he was wounded and was actually his sword. This show you a picture. This is Thomas Benton Smith. Oh, I didn't have a lot of pictures. Okay, when he surrendered, he was like on a rear guard outfit. The Confederates were retreating. He was left in the rear guard. The man that he surrendered to took the sword and chopped him across the head, split his skull open. They said they could see his brain. He actually lived. They thought he never lived, but he actually did. His sword is in the museum at the Sam Davis home. I'm not supposed to take pictures in the museum, but since I'm on the board, I did anyway. And, you see that. Okay.
John, where did he spend his final days?
In a mental institution, it would be like across from the airport, up to the national
Central
airport.
State. Yeah.
Central State, yeah. At times he'd be rational, at other times not too good. Did some strange things. A little bit of history I've run across about the Smiths and the Jobes. In the book on the life of Colonel James Moore King, it's a collection of family stories by Colonel King's youngest son, Will King. Now, that's another one of my ancestors. He was a great-great-grandfather of mine. Information on the Jobe and Smith families. Alexander Smith worked for Colonel King's son, James Moore King, Jr. He was my great-granddad's uncle. Just throw that in. And so the King boys, they knew the Smiths. So he, in this book, was described as inoffensive, quiet, inoffensive boy. But then, this is him. He's the one that took revenge for the killing of his cousin. So the Kings, the Smiths, and the Jobes were all acquainted. They all knew each other. The oldest son, Luke, it's hard to find much on him. Ben and I know about his
I
great-grandfather.
know less about him than I do the others two.
I'm gonna let you know. You can do that. You can tell that part. Anyway, DeWitt and Ben, there's a lot written about them, but Luke joined the 46th Infantry. It was organized in Paris, Tennessee. And they were sent to island number 10 in the Mississippi River. It was probably to be to guard the river about like Fort Henry and Fort Donaldson. But they were the 46th captured. They surrendered at Tiptonville, Tennessee, April 8, 1862, and sent to prison at Camp Douglas. And the description for Camp Douglas was 80 acres of hell. They were paroled at Vicksburg, Mississippi, September 23, 1862. And that's about all I could find on him. The 46th was reorganized later, but no record of what else, what Luke Hill did. Maybe he took the amnesty oath, maybe not. After the war, he married and settled in Stewart County, Tennessee, that's Dover. Student teacher. Okay. Ben and DeWitt were in training together at Camp Trousdale. Went in May 20th, 1861. DeWitt he wrote a lot of letters. Give you some examples. Now these letters that he wrote, let's see, there was, okay, this is what the envelopes look like. They are in the Corps Center at the college in Murfreesboro. There was one, all he had was a piece of cardboard, and he wrote the address on it, and wrote a note on the back. But these letters, a couple of examples. That's one he just wrote it on the back of a piece of cardboard.